This morning we're going to spend time in the scriptures, and I really want to encourage you, if you've got a Bible with you, go ahead and take that out. If there's a Bible in the pew in front of you, take that out. If you don't have one with you, go ahead and pull out that phone of yours. And we're going to be in Matthew quite a bit, and this morning we're actually going to start a little bit of a short series, Redemption Drawing Near. This will be part one, kind of an introduction to the topic, and then we'll spend a little bit of time exploring it further next week. Matthew chapter 24 is where we're going to start, and we'll go ahead and pray together and then give a little bit of background and then jump right into it. So let's pray again. Lord, thank you so much that we can come and worship you here. Thank you that you've met with us not just today but this week, and today we ask for a special blessing from you. We want to hear from you. We want to be inspired by you. We want to be transformed into people that reflect who you are more and more. And so we ask for your Spirit to work that miracle so that Jesus is known. And we ask for that in his name. Amen. Matthew chapter 24 is the last week of Jesus' life on earth, and he's traveling with his disciples. He's entered into Jerusalem, which is the religious hub of his day, and he's taught in the temple there and created quite a controversy, eventually to the point where he drives out people that are using that religious edifice for the purpose of making money and creating barriers so that people can't pursue God. And so he drives people out of there, and he's soundly rejected by the religious community because of that. And so as he's exiting the temple for the final time, there's this weighty sigh that comes out from the depths of his soul. It's in Matthew chapter 23, and it's the prelude to the passage we'll be spending some time in this morning. Matthew chapter 23 and verse 37, and as Jesus is speaking these words, he's thinking about the community that he's come to bless and to serve and to help that's rejected him. And his heart is just broken. But he's also speaking against the backdrop of knowing the history of Israel, his people, for hundreds and thousands of years, and their consistent rejection of God's leading. And so he speaks in verse 37 there, Matthew chapter 23, verse 37. If you're there, just go ahead and say amen. He says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. See, your house is left to you," what's that next word? Desolate. "For I say to you, you shall see me no more till you say, 'Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.'" And so Jesus has now been rejected by his people, and as he's leaving the temple, he says, hey, this thing may look beautiful. The temple of Jerusalem was one of the sights to behold that people would have just absolutely fainted over by seeing for the first time. It was largely constructed of white marble, and it's been said, historical accounts tell us that the construction of the temple was such that the joints, the seams between the blocks of marble that were there were so skillfully constructed that from a distance it looked like one giant piece of marble. It would catch the sun as the sun was rising and setting and just had this magnificent, beautiful appearance to it. It was the source of a decades-long renovation project by Herod the Great. And so this is a place that had been, in our time, millions and millions and millions of dollars had been spent on renovating this. And for hundreds and thousands of years, the temple, first the sanctuary, then Solomon's temple, and now finally this third temple, or sanctuary edifice, these were the central religious teaching institutions for the Jewish people. And so from the very beginning, when God calls a family and he says, I'm going to make you a great nation, and I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to teach you, and through you, the entire world is going to be blessed. At the very start of that story, way back in the book of Exodus, God sets out to have them build an edifice where he can teach people the way in which he's going to draw humanity back to himself. And the thing that he has them construct is the sanctuary, and the layout of the sanctuary is such that it basically teaches people how God and humans can have a restored, renewed relationship without all the brokenness. And so for hundreds and thousands of years, this is how people learn how God is going to make things right one day. And eventually this temple becomes a source of Jewish nationalism and pride. We're just on the tail end of the Olympics, and we have seen this series of events where people come and they represent their nation, and they're focused on the pride of representing the nation that they are from. And in many ways, the temple was for the Jews the source of national identification. It's what makes Jews awesome. That's kind of the idea. When a Jewish boy for the first time would go to the temple, his heart would just swell with pride to see this beautiful thing, and he would say to himself and he would say to others, this is who we are. We're God's people. And so when Jesus has his group of ragtag followers, people who have grown up very much steeped in the Jewish culture and the Jewish ethnic awareness, cherishing a sense of pride, even to this day, even to the days that Jesus is speaking these words, asking him questions about when their national greatness is going to be restored. And so when Jesus takes that group of ragtag followers and he says to them, hey, I tell you what, this house is desolate now. Empty. Right, many of you, when you hear that word desolate, you think about the wind-swept plains, right? From the Dust Bowl days. You think of that Ken Burns documentary of the great desolation across mid-America when people overfarmed and you had a series of droughts and it's just dust blowing around this giant dust bowl, right? This imagery comes to mind, and Jesus looks at this beautiful edifice, something akin to the way that we feel looking at the White House or going to Washington, D.C. and seeing the national monuments. And Jesus looks at it and says, desolate, barren, empty. And when they hear this, they're absolutely flabbergasted. They're stunned. They're shattered. They don't know what to make of this. And so in Matthew 24, verse 1, with this backdrop in mind, it says that Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And you see what they're doing. It's kind of this moment of, hey, Jesus says, this house is desolate. And then the disciples say, no, but look at it. It's awesome, right? Look at how beautiful this is. Gold everywhere, just immense in its beauty and its scope. And Jesus looks them in the eyes and he says, do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone will be left here upon another that will not be thrown down. He said it's desolate and it's going to be completely obliterated. And as he sat on the Mount of Olives, verse 3, the disciples, they're so curious, they came to him privately saying, hey, tell us when these things will be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Now here they ask this compound question. It's made up of a couple parts, but the drive behind it is basically in the Jewish thinking, in their awareness, if the temple's destroyed so that there's not a stone upon another, they're thinking this is the end of all things. And so they come to Jesus and they say, hey, you said it's going to be destroyed. When is this going to happen? When's the end of the world? When are you coming? And so they take these various questions and they roll them into one compound question. And Jesus, with an amazing sensitivity and delicateness, knowing what the future holds for these men in just the next week, what sort of hellish experience they're going to go through, rather than parsing it out and giving them the future in painful detail, he sort of blends his answer to these various questions in a way that they'll be able to understand the big picture, but they won't be unnecessarily burdened by knowing the nitty-gritty details of all the sorrow that they're going to go through. Now, just to kind of illustrate the wisdom of that, just a show of hands, how many of you would like to know the future? Right? How many of you would not like to know the future? Okay, now those of you you saw the hands, you don't want to know the future, just turn to someone next to you. Why wouldn't you want to know the future? What are some of the reasons why you don't want to know the future? Obviously, it's not for investing strategies, right? Curious, what are some reasons? Why wouldn't you want to know the future? Bad things coming, right? Now, some of you saw the weather report. There's going to be an abominable blizzard. And for a week, you were like stocking up on provisions and getting ready because you thought this is going to be terrible. How many of you are impacted by your desire to know the future because of your past? Right? You've gone through a painful, difficult experience in the past, and you thought, man, if I would have seen that coming, if I would have known how bad that was going to be before it happened, I don't know what I would have done. Right? Jesus knows that within a week, he's going to be have been crucified. He knows that in a short order of time, Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. He knows the fate of the disciples that he's looking at. There's 12 disciples, and one of them is going to reject Jesus completely. Of the remaining 11, 10 of them are going to be persecuted and ultimately die for their faith. The final one was just preserved miraculously. And so Jesus looks at this group of people, and he sees the handwriting on the wall. He knows what's waiting for them, but he doesn't want to overburden them. That's not his point here. Often when we read these passages, we do it with a sense of fear and dread, but Jesus' express purpose in how he communicates is not to weigh them down with anxiety and care. It's to awake them to a sense of watchfulness. And so what he does then is he begins to beautifully weave together in this story a picture of the answer to these questions of the disciples, and it comes in three primary phases. See, the first phase, Jesus is going to describe the events surrounding the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Then he's going to deal with what's called in the Bible as the Great Tribulation, this long historic period in which people are persecuted for their faith. And he describes that, and then he spends a little bit of time describing what it'll be like on earth just before he comes, just before he returns to earth. But he moves through, in general, these three phases, and the way that he answers the question, what you'll find is that there are elements of what happens here that are going to continue on throughout the whole story. And you're going to find things during this time that are going to be present in those times, but he's moving through this sequence of three historical periods, and he's saying, these are the general themes of what you're going to be experiencing, what you're going to be feeling. It's not laid out in specific detail. There's not a timeline, right? There's no sort of chronology with you are here, and then at this year this happens, and then this year, but these are the events, and this is what it's going to be like, and this is how to live with peace in the middle of all that. I think these are important words for us today because we find ourselves in this story that's being told. And if we just rely on the news sources, if we just rely on what we experience and what we hear from our neighbors, it's easy for us to become afraid and overwhelmed. But if we hear Jesus speaking into our world today, he's telling us, I saw already what was going to happen. Don't be afraid. I'm right there with you in the midst of it. In fact, later in Luke's telling of the story, Jesus will say, when you see all these things begin to take place, lift up your eyes because your redemption draws near. These are not signs of your destruction. These are signs that soon I'm going to make all things right. And so, with that in mind, Jesus begins to answer their question. And in verse 4, he begins by saying, take heed that no one deceives you. The very first warning of Jesus when he talks about the destruction of Jerusalem, when he talks about this great period of persecution, when he talks about what happens just before his coming, he gives the warning, don't be tricked. People are going to tell you a lot of things. Don't be out to be gullible. Don't be deceived by them. Verse 5, he says, many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not what? Troubled. What an amazing statement Jesus makes to the disciples. Now, what he's communicating here is primarily to the disciples. This is happening in about the year 31 AD. In about 40 years, Jerusalem is going to be totally ransacked, destroyed, ripped apart. The people living there are going to be sent throughout the world. Many of them will lose their lives in that siege. And Jesus says that in the context of that, you're going to be hearing wars about this war, and there are going to be people claiming to be the Messiah, saying, God has raised me up to deliver us as a nation. And in the middle of all that, Jesus says, no, this is going to happen, but make sure that you're not troubled by it. And I just want to ask you the question today. Seeing what you see, living in the world that you live in, watching what you watch, knowing what you know, are you allowing your soul to be troubled by it? Is your experience becoming dictated by the pain and the affliction and the unrest and uncertainty that you see? Because Jesus' hope for you, Jesus' desire for you is not that you would look around and be troubled and be shaking and be quivering. Jesus' desire is that you would have peace and confidence in him despite the brokenness that you see. And so I want to encourage you that if you're giving into fear, if you're giving into terror, if you're giving into to questionings and doubts and misgivings. That's not what Jesus is wanting for you. See that you're not troubled. He says, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, pestilences, earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Now, does anyone in here have the ESV, the English Standard Version that they're reading out of this morning? Yeah. That last verse there, verse 8, do you mind just shouting that out and reading how your version translates that? Yeah. See, many of our Bibles, they say these are the beginning of sorrows. The ESV renders it quite accurately. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Now, the risk of speaking about things I know nothing about. Bruce, after you left with your kidney stone the other day, I hope I'm not violating HIPAA here. Too late. You can sue me, but it will not benefit you greatly. But after you left and we were having special prayer for you, we took a scientific survey of the ladies that had given birth and that had also had a kidney stone. And we were just asking the simple question, is it true that a kidney stone is as excruciating as birth pain? And you'll be disappointed to know that the ladies flatly denied that they are equivalent. They said that one is much more excruciating. It's a painful experience, and I've been eyewitness to it. I haven't experienced it myself. They're looking forward to but even so with the kidney pain, there's this painful presence, and it's pointing to the fact that there's a deliverance coming. And so when Jesus is talking about earthquakes and famines and pestilences and all these things, these are things that took place in a dramatic fashion before the nation of Israel and Jerusalem was destroyed. These took place. There were major earthquakes in the 40s, 50s, and 60s AD before the destruction of Jerusalem. But when Jesus talks about these things, he says, hey, these are like contraction pains. And the thing about a contraction is that it's a painful experience, but once it starts happening, you know that there's a process that's underway that's going to reach a culminating moment. Like this is a train, and it's chugging down the tracks, and there is a destination that we're going to arrive at. And the ride is going to get worse and worse and worse along the way. But the point isn't the painful pain and the contraction experience. That's not the point. The point is that there's a point of deliverance at the end. There's a point of new life at the end. And so when Jesus is talking about all this destruction, it's easy to get focused on those things. But what he's saying is just like birth pains, you're going to have more and more often you'll have these experiences, just like contractions. They begin to increase in frequency, and you'll find that they also increase in intensity. And so Jesus is saying, hey, not that throughout history you're never going to have earthquakes, you're never going to have wars, and then all of a sudden you'll have them. No, what he's saying is the world is going to be characterized from your time until I come by wars, by rumors of wars, by earthquakes, by people not having enough food to eat. These things are going to be consistent patterns, but what you're going to find is over time they intensify in frequency and intensity. They become more powerful. You live today, those of you that have lived for a while, and you look at the world and you say, man, things seem like they're ramping up. There's the sense, we're running out of letters in the alphabet to name natural disasters, right? This is the world we live in. This is what Jesus anticipated. He said then, verse 9, then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you. You'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. False prophets will rise up and deceive many. Verse 12, and because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. This is a fascinating thing that Jesus says. He says, when the world is this broken, people's hearts are going to begin to get hard. I want to ask you this morning, are you being troubled by the brokenness of the world in a way that's unsettling you? And when you see the senseless violence that takes place, is it causing the intensity of your love to wane? Does it cause you to give in to apathy Does it cause you to feel overwhelmed, like I can't make a difference, and so I'm not going to even try? Jesus says one of the cautions that his followers need to take is that when we see the world in its brokenness, we don't give in to despair, and we don't allow our loving actions to diminish. So commit yourself. Don't be troubled. Don't let your love grow cold. He continues and says, verse 13, he who endures to the end shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom, this good news of how I'm making all things right through my death, it will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. And so this section largely deals with the events leading up to the destruction of the Jerusalem in the year 70 A.D. And we find the Apostle Paul will later write, he'll write under inspiration of the Spirit that the gospel had been preached to the entire world in his day. The disciples were so filled with a love for Jesus that they went out in the middle of these difficult times and they said, hey, the world is broken, but there's a story that's being written, that's being unfolded, that rights the wrongs and heals your brokenness. And as they took this message to the world, people found peace, people found hope, they found newness, they found forgiveness. So that Paul could eventually say, the world has been told. Jesus then describes a little bit more about the destruction of Jerusalem there in verse 15. It's kind of an obscure sounding verse. He says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. In Luke's translation of this event, he says it this way. He says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that its desolation is near. And so what Jesus is saying is really pretty simple. He's saying, hey, the temple in Jerusalem is going to be desolate. It's going to be destroyed. And this is going to happen according to Jesus because a Roman army is going to come in and destroy it. And so he says to his followers here, he says, when you see the city surrounded by troops, then leave. Run to the mountains. And historically, that's exactly what happened. The Roman armies surrounded the city of Jerusalem. They were laying siege to it. And then shortly after they began that, they left. And everyone who had heard Jesus' words and believed them, as soon as that group of soldiers left the city, they all got out. And then the armies came back and sieged Jerusalem, and that's when it was destroyed. But not a single person who listened to what Jesus had warned lost their life in the destruction of Jerusalem. He gave this warning. When you see it surrounded, get out, flee to the mountains. Verse 18, let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house. Let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. Woe to those who are pregnant, those who are nursing babies in those days. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on Sabbath. Then in verse 21, he begins to rapidly advance. And he says, then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no one would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. So Jesus has dealt with the destruction of Jerusalem, and he says, when you see it surrounded by armies, get out. Then he says, and then there's going to be this huge tribulation, and there's never been anything like it. There won't be anything like it. But God will cut it short so that people can be saved. This period of persecution lasted for over 1,000 years. We call it the Dark Ages, when people were killed simply for the crime of having a Bible and believing that Jesus was their Savior. This went on, and it was so forceful that people groups were almost extinguished. But God intervened, and he cut those persecution days short so that someone would be saved. Then he gives this warning. He says, hey, there's going to be false prophets, false Christ at that time. When they say, go here, this is where Jesus is. Go there, that's where Jesus is. Don't listen to them. They're trying to trick you. In verse 29, now Jesus just briefly jumps us down to the events. He's just briefly covered this great tribulation, and now he's going to make some statements that just very briefly deal with events right before he returns to earth. Verse 29. He says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now, there's something that's really fascinating here, because what you have is that you have this long period of over 1,000 years of persecution. And the thing that largely cuts that persecution short is a historical event in which the godless French regime at the time basically says, we're tired of what the church is doing in the name of Jesus. We're through with all this stuff. And through under a really strident atheism, they march in and they depose the religious leadership, and they basically declare that the only God that exists is reason. And so they sort of establish this new godless society, this new godless vision of how the world works. And this happens in just before 1800. And so what Jesus says then is that when this tribulation, when this great persecuting power is coming to an end, you'll find these events that happen, big cosmic events, and these are signposts, these are mile markers, these are things that indicate that the coming of my kingdom is the very next thing that will happen. And so he describes these events that the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. Now, what's fascinating, you can do this later this afternoon, if you just Google the words dark day, you'll be able to read on Wikipedia, you can read it wherever, about this day in New England primarily, in which the sun was blacked out in the middle of the day and people had no idea why. People were terrified. The animals started to act as though the day was over. The sun was just gone. People didn't know why. And many people at that time remember New England at this time. The dark day was May 19, 1780. New England at that time is a very biblically literate world. And so when people are seeing this happen, they're thinking of what Jesus has said, and they're saying, hey, this is the time when Jesus is going to come. This is the end of the world. The dark day. There's this painting that was made that features Abraham Davenport. He was a legislator in Connecticut. And while they were meeting at this time, during this dark day, the sun suddenly became, just became pitch black where people couldn't read in front of their faces. No idea why. This is midday. And so the legislators are saying, hey, let's go home. It's dark. Like, this is the end of the world. Let's go home and be at home for the end of the world. And there's this poem that's penned, or a song, that features what Abraham Davenport, one of the legislators, says during this time. It's just fascinating. He says, this may well be the day of judgment which the world awaits. He said, it's dark. This might be the sign that this is the end. But be it so or not, I only know my present duty and my Lord's command to occupy till he come. This is awesome. I think this features exactly what Jesus is saying, right? Hey, I'm coming. You're going to see all this happen. Don't be troubled. Keep your eyes open and be faithful. He looks around at his friends that want to leave. He says, hey, this may very well be the end of the world. But all I know is that my Lord has commanded me to occupy until he comes. He says, so at the post where he has set me in his providence, I choose for one to meet him face to face. I want to be right where he placed me, doing what he asked me to do when he comes. I want to see him face to face, doing what he's called me to do. No faithless servant frightened from my task, but ready when the Lord of the harvest calls. And therefore, with all reverence, I would say, let God do his work. We will see to ours. Bring in the candles. And so they called for candles, they brought them in, and they continued to meet this moment. They said, God may be coming now, and this may be the moment of the end of the world, but this is what God has called us to do, and so let's be faithful when he comes. That sort of courage. This is a man who knows his Savior, isn't terrified by what's coming, but is enthusiastic and says, I simply want to be faithful. I simply want to be faithful. And so you can look it up, and you'll find this painting of Abraham Davenport that was hung in the courthouse in that city there, where they were bringing in the candles to light so the legislators could do their work. But the point is simple and remains. Jesus said after this tribulation ends, sometime in the late 1700s, you'll begin to see these cosmic signs. One is the darkening of the sun. Later that day, the moon wouldn't give its light. It was appeared red in the sky. This is a historical event, 1780, it takes place. Jesus says that you'll see the heavens shaking and the stars will fall from heaven. In 1833, you get this cosmic display of Leonid meteors. It happens every 33 years, but it's certain because every 33 years, basically there's this meteor that's going through the sky, and it's losing little pieces, and it displays, and there are tails that come off this thing, and every 33 years it happens that we're closer to it, so we get a better view of it. But in 1833, they had this amazing display of meteors, and Fletcher Watson from Harvard is writing about this experience. He says, beginning before midnight, the meteors increased in frequency until at dawn they were thick as snowflakes. He says this thing is just happening so that it looks like it's snowing, stars falling out of the sky. A single observer often saw 20 appear within a second. Many people thought this was the end of the world. Fletcher Watson, not a religious man writing, he's recounting this as a historical fact from Harvard. And he's saying, this is what was happening. This is how the stars were falling. People were looking and saying, man, it's the end of the world again. The simple point I want to make is not to dwell on these things particularly. It's simply to say that when Jesus is saying to his disciples, hey, what's it look like right before I come? He says, there's this big persecution. That will subside because I will shorten the days of it. And then the next thing that will happen, the sun's going to go dark, stars falling from the sky, and then the very next thing that he describes is his coming. Right? So if we're saying, hey, Jesus, what are the signs that are going to take place right before you come? There's not another one on his list that he gives his followers. In fact, the last major sort of cosmic thing, 1833. And so why do I tell you that? Because Jesus is saying to us today, I'm coming soon. I'm coming soon. You can look for the signs. You can see what's happening. You can see what's coming. But the last big, aha, ta-da thing that Jesus describes in Matthew 24 has already happened. We're living in the time of anticipation of Jesus is coming soon. What's the point? Jesus then tells this simple story. Verse 32. He says, learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer's near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. So Jesus is saying, hey, look, learn a lesson. If you see a fig tree and it's budding, it's blooming, you know what's about to happen. He's saying to his disciples, when you look around and you see these events transpire, understand what's about to happen. Jerusalem will be destroyed. There will be a great persecution. And I'm going to come and fix this broken world. Jesus says these signs that you see are signs that I'm coming soon, so be ready. Know that there is hope coming. He continues and he says, no one knows the exact time. It's like Noah. He builds an ark for 120 years. He says, get in the boat. God wants you to be saved. People mock him, scorn him. They just go on living their lives, doing the things they've always done. But then one day, the door to the ark closes with all the animals inside, and there's a flood that comes. And so Jesus says, you don't know the day. You can't put it on your calendar and say, hey, get ready. Jesus is coming on this date sometime in the future. He says, you don't know the day. You don't know the hour. And so his conclusion, his point, the thing that he's telling us today, then look here in verse 42. He says, watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. But know this, if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Right? Like if a thief is going to come over to your house, he doesn't call and schedule an appointment. Just wanted to see if you have any availability for this coming week. I want to come over and take your TV. Right? That doesn't happen. They catch you by surprise. And if a thief did do that, you'd be ready, right? You'd have your dogs out there. You'd have the police all marshaled together. And he's saying, in the same way, you don't know when I'm coming. So what does he say to do? Verse 44, therefore, you also what? be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Now, I think it's fascinating when Jesus tells his disciples to be ready. Because the focus on the phrase be ready is on a state, it's on duration. Be ready. It's different than the phrase get ready. I don't know about you, but in our home, the difference between get ready and be ready is about 2 hours. Right? How many of you have ever thought, oh, we're going to get up early tomorrow morning and we're going to go on a vacation? We will leave at 9 a.m. in the morning and we will be out of here. We just need to get up and put a few things in the car. It's very late, so we'll just go to bed, do it in the morning, and then we'll get ready. Then when you pull out at 2 in the afternoon, having changed the oil now, found some place for the dog to stay, found the missing mitten that was needed, vacuumed the car, gotten gas, yada, yada, getting breakfast. Oh, we should pack a lunch. Might as well take a nap. See, all these things, the time that transpires in all of these activities, that's the get ready. Once all these things are done, and then you continue to not break the getting ready that's been done, you are being ready, right? Someone calls and says, hey, we're coming over. Then you got to get ready. And then once you get ready, your job is to not undo what has been done and to continue in that pattern. I remember our dear secretary of the yesteryear, before we had the awesome Annette working. And I just want to say for a moment, Annette is an awesome asset in ministry to the Hoodview Church. We just really appreciate her and Mike and their investment in this community so much. They're fantastic. I just wanted to use this as an illustration just for a minute. When Cheryl and Todd, our previous secretary, when they were getting ready to move and they knew they were selling their house, they went through and they got their house ready for sale, right? So they went and they cleaned everything. They got rid of a bunch of junk. They replaced the deck. They did all these things. And I remember Cheryl saying to me that one of the things that was frustrating is because once they'd cleaned everything and made it picture perfect, pristine, it was hard for them because they had to live in the house and constantly be ready to show it. So they put the toaster away in places they didn't really want it so that the countertop would look nice and clean so it would be ready. But then when they wanted to make toast, they pulled it out. And so the challenge that they had was to get the house to the place where it could be shown and then not undo what had happened while they were waiting for people to come and look at their house. They got it ready, but then they had to stay ready. See, the counsel that Jesus gives, he says, look at this world. I'm going to be coming soon, but my counsel to you isn't hurry up and get ready. My counsel is to live in a place where you are ready. To live in such a way that you are ready. Because the truth of the matter is that the way we choose to listen to Jesus speak to us today is making us into the kind of people that can either respond to him or not respond to him in the future. The way that we're following him, the way that we're listening to him is either making us people that are more and more willing to listen to his voice or people that are less and less willing to listen to his voice. And so his counsel to us is to live in such a way that whether he comes tomorrow or he comes in 10 years, we're ready. We're doing what he's called us to. Our lives are surrendered to him. We have peace with God. We're not being troubled by what's happening in the world. Our love is ardent because Jesus is near and dear to us. And when we think of his coming, we're not worried about all the bad things that are going to happen. We're looking forward to the day when we see our Savior face to face. In order to live in a way in which you are ready, there might be some of us in here who need to do some things to get ready. Maybe God has been whispering to you, speaking to your heart, laying a burden on you, calling you to something. There are things that you're doing, you say, hey, that's just the way I am. But God has been convicting you and speaking to you and saying, I want to make you something different. Maybe there are some of you in here who said, man, I haven't really given my life over to Jesus to say, I want you to lead. But I'm just kind of waiting and looking at the landscape of the world, and when the time comes, then I'll do it. When I see something happen, then I think, okay, now I'll get ready really fast. And Jesus is speaking to us, and he's communicating to us, and he's saying, don't do that. live in a way in which you are ready. There's this fable that's told about Satan getting together with a couple of his tempters, his chief angels, and leading people astray. And they're discussing, how is it that we can lead humanity into destruction? How can we lead them astray? And so one of the apprentice devils comes to him and says, I will tell people that there is no God. That's how I'll mess people up. And the fable goes that Satan looks at him and says, that won't delude many people because people know in their heart of hearts that there is a God. And so there's a second one that comes and says, I will delude people because I will tell them that there is no coming judgment. They can do whatever they want and it won't make a difference. He says that won't delude many people because people know they have a sense of justice in their heart of hearts and they recognize that they're guilty. They recognize that this can't go on forever and someday God will call people to accounts and things will be made right. The fable goes then that there was a third that came to Satan and he said, I will tell people to be right with God and to live for him tomorrow. Satan responded and said, go, and you will ruin many. See, the tendency of human nature is the tendency of my heart, right? My in-laws are coming, and my mother is the Canadian Martha Stewart. My mother-in-law is just amazing. You go to her house, you can eat off of any surface in there. It's amazing, but that is not who I am in my heart of hearts. And so when she comes, I have this sense of, okay, I will get ready for her to come. But what inevitably happens is I put off the act of cleaning until the last possible minute, and I always anticipate, oh, they'll be there at this hour, but I never remember the fact that the motivation of grandchildren causes people to drive faster than is warranted. So I'm always thinking, okay, they'll be here by 10. And I'm thinking in my head, it takes me 35 minutes to clean the living room to a satisfactory level. She's a wonderful person, by the way. She doesn't guilt me. This is just kind of my own baggage. I don't know why I have it. I don't know what the issue is. But inevitably, I think, okay, she'll be here at 9. And then at 8, I see headlights pull up. Right? And I've still got clothes and a mop. And then in 3 minutes, I'm just trying to shove things in, holes and find things, find pots, find baskets, find anything. Jono, take all this stuff to your room. Right? There's this stressful moment, and in my heart of hearts, I know this, man, I've caused myself more stress than I needed to, and I haven't actually done the things that would have brought me peace. See, our tendency is to say, I will pick a time, and then I will start to get ready. Jesus speaks to us, and he says, no. Don't pick a time in the future. You don't know the day or the hour, so you live ready. There's a little boy that used to like to sleep in the mornings. He had this routine that he would wake up 15 minutes later than he should, get up, have his hair, the cowlick flying in the back, grab a piece of toast, put some butter and bread on it. His mom would say, get out the door, get out the door, get out the door, get out the door, you got to get to the bus. And he would calmly and coolly eat his toast, and then he looked at the clock and he knew the exact minute when he had to bolt. He would run out the front door, sprint down the street, come around the corner, and he would get there just as the school bus was opening its door. This was his routine every morning. He could get a couple more minutes sleeping because he knew when he had to get ready. Well, one morning he woke up a couple minutes later than he knew that he had to. And so his mom offered him the piece of toast. He said, no time for that. I got to go. I'm late. So he ran out the door, and he knew he was already behind, and he was running, sprinting down the street, came around the corner just to see the bus had already pulled away. The driver couldn't see him. And he thought, now what am I going to do? Just as he was letting the desperation of that moment sink in, there was an older gentleman sitting on a park bench right by, seeing the whole thing. And with a twinkle in his eye, he sort of looked at the boy and said, looks like you didn't run fast enough this morning. The boy thought about it for a second and looked back at the older gentleman and he said, no, I ran fast enough. I just didn't start soon enough. Jesus is saying, I'm coming soon. Don't put off from today what can be done so that you can live with peace and confidence in knowing Jesus as your Savior today. Don't put it off till the future. Don't think, oh, I can live my life how I want to and party it up and get all the enjoyment I can out of life, and when the last moment strikes, then I'll switch teams. The true joy of life is living with Jesus each day. And so Jesus is inviting you, whatever your past experience has been, maybe you're someone that's been putting it off, but today Jesus is saying, whatever your past experience has been, you can have the peace and joy of living in relationship with me. You can know me as your Savior and live with confidence in the middle of this world. This morning, what I'd like to do is to pray together, but before I do that, I want to give you just a couple of seconds in the privacy of your own thoughts and your own mind to talk to God and to meditate on what we've experienced here today. Maybe God's been whispering something to you, and He's saying today is your day. Tomorrow may never come, but today God has given to you. And so I want to invite you just to spend a couple seconds talking to God. How does He want you to move on the basis of this? How does He want you to live in response to this? Are you feeling peace in knowing Jesus? Are you trusting Him? How does He want you to respond to today? Father, you love us, and we're so glad that you've invested all of heaven in making it possible for us to know you. You're so patient, so faithful, and Lord, we're looking forward to a day in which you'll come and make all things new. So today, hear us as we talk this over with you. Lay on our hearts what we need to hear. Help us to respond in a way that puts us in touch with the grace of Jesus so we can experience the peace of having Him as our Savior. Jesus, we look forward to the day when you'll come, when the skies will rip open and we'll see your beautiful face for the first time. Until that day, Lord, teach us to walk with you. Teach us to live for you in a way that brings light and joy to those that are struggling. We ask it now in your sweet name. Amen.